Well, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
This is take 2 of our introduction. We had a little technical difficulties.
What's going to happen is inevitably one day when they release Blu-rays of all of our podcasts, there'll be like a blooper reel, and
Exactly.
that'll just be on the bloopers.
Yeah. So, I like to think we're getting better at this all the time, but also I think we're finding all the ways for things to go wrong.
Listen, as I said before, you get all the credit for everything. You do all the work on this, so
Yeah.
it's fine. I don't mind to sit and watch you try to figure things out, because I certainly can't help when it comes to this stuff.
I like to imagine that it unlocks my inner Spielberg, and all the things that go wrong will actually lead to a better product in the end.
Well, as we learned from last week, talking about Jaws, a lot of stuff went wrong on Jaws. So this is your equivalent of directing Jaws.
Exactly. I think the viewers and listeners at home are going, he's no Spielberg.
No.
And you know what? That's okay. There's only one Spielberg.
There is only one Spielberg, as we learned last week.
I will not feel at all embarrassed not to live up to that standard.
No, those are high expectations.
Well, as we just mentioned, we'll
mention it again.
We talked Jaws last week.
So much fun.
Which was a lot of fun. It's your favorite movie.
That could have been a 9-part podcast. I could have just kept going and going and going.
It's just we left some what do they say? Some fruit on the vine to pick later.
Yeah.
So we can revisit.
Yeah.
Have more Jaws conversation later. But
sure.
This week we're going to talk about my favorite movie.
Yeah, it's your turn.
And that means we're going to be talking about
Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes.
That's exactly right. I thought about having a joke maybe that I threw out there, but
all week long I was like, I knew I was going to do that, but I was trying to decide what movie to do. And I would, if you don't mind, I would like to confess it came down between Weekend at Bernie's or Air Bud 2 Golden Receiver. Those were my two. I couldn't decide which one to go with, and it just Weekend at Bernie's is just what came out of my mouth.
Not to spoil it, but there is a famous football movie that I notoriously do not care for, that a lot of people give me grief about. How upset would they be if Air Bud 2 Golden Receiver was actually my favorite football?
Yeah. We would have an angry listener. Maybe her name is Brittany White, possibly. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
That would have been a great a troll move if I waxed poetic for an hour about the merits of Air Bud 2 Golden Receiver.
Or you could have done Air Bud 7th Inning Fetch. You could have done that one too if we wanted to switch to baseball. So.
You really get the sense with the Air Bud movies that they came up with the titles first and then said, let's make a movie from that.
There's another one too, but I can't remember it right now. So when we really deep dive into the Air Bud series, I'll have it all written down. But for now, that's what I came up with.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Man, we're off to a bad start.
Or a great start.
It depends
on how you want to look at it.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I interrupted.
No, it's fine. Today we're going to be talking about the 2010 movie, The Social Network.
Your favorite movie.
It is my favorite movie. I feel probably a little less conviction or passion about it being my favorite than you do Jaws being your favorite. I think it's more like there's a lot of movies that sit near the top of my favorite, and as I just sort of weed through them all, it's the one that I always just pick is like I feel most comfortable and safe saying this is my favorite. And you know what? I rewatched it again 2 nights ago just to make sure I was prepared for this pod. I totally didn't need to because
you can basically just replay it in your head.
But the fact that I could rewatch it again and just enjoy it again, it just reminded me, like, this is why I say it's my favorite, because I never tire of watching it, and there's just endless little things in it that I find fascinating.
That's the test, I think, for your favorite movies. Just the 2 things you just mentioned. Number 1, that you just never get tired of watching it. And number 2, there's just always some little detail or something different you can find every time you watch it. It's a sign of a great movie.
Yeah. So I'll just say that one of my biggest movie regrets is that I didn't catch this movie when it came out in theaters.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about that.
Not so much because there's movies I regret not catching in theaters because they would have been great theater movies.
Yes.
Gravity is the number one on that one because that was made for theaters and I didn't catch it in theaters. But The Social Network, just because it is my favorite movie and I didn't catch it till it came out for video release, is when I watched it.
Interesting.
And it's to my knowledge, never been re-released in a theater. So it's,
don't think
where
so.
you've had the opportunity to go back and catch Jaws in theaters,
Yeah.
I would really relish the opportunity for them to put Social Network in theaters and me to go watch it on just a really big screen.
That'd be really cool.
But-
Well, I wanted to ask one thing I was thinking of, because of course I knew this is what you were going to talk about. Jaws came out. I was born in 1980. Jaws came out in 1975, so it already existed. I discovered it. Do you remember like the anticipation for this movie and knowing that Fincher and Sorkin, which we'll talk about, I know, were teaming up? Do you remember all that?
So the wild thing about that is that I did not have a lot of anticipation for this movie.
Really?
Despite the fact that I
Seems
loved
like it was
Sorkin
just- yeah.
and I loved Fincher, I think I just couldn't imagine that a movie about the creation of Facebook was going to be that good.
Yeah.
Even though people I really loved were doing it, it just still and I think that's maybe the most amazing thing about this movie to me is I think about how much it shouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't be a good movie. It's a movie about the creation of a website.
Yeah.
And just to give a little background of where my thoughts were on social media at the time, this movie comes out in 2010. Facebook had been in my life like 4 years at this point. I think it came out when I was about a junior in college. I was never a big social media guy in any form. It wasn't exactly social media, but I know in high school people did the instant messaging or whatever it was, AIM or whatever.
Yeah.
I was never one of those guys. I didn't go in chat rooms. I didn't do anything like that.
Same.
And when Facebook came out, I remember it being kind of a big deal and hearing people talk about Facebook. And the only reason I got it was because friends convinced me that, hey, when we all part from college and go back to our separate states and we won't see each other, this is going to be a great way for us to keep up. So I said, okay, I'll get Facebook. And I did for that reason. And so I was on it and I was active, but it was never something that I was really that excited about. It was more just I felt like it was a good way, like I said, to make sure I had some sort of contact with people that I was going separate ways with. And then when I heard there's a movie about this site, I'm like,
that's not that exciting.
This site? Why would we need a movie about this site?
And that's really good perspective too, because I think now if a movie were to come out about a big social media, the invention of a social media, I do think it would be a bigger deal than it was in 2010 or 2009 probably when they announced the project. Because I remember, I'm not as much, I like Sorkin, I like Fincher a lot, but I remember kind of the same reaction that you're having, where it's just okay, Facebook just didn't mean anything to me at that stage in my life. I had it, I used it, but to me it was just, I don't know, it was underwhelming to me, just the idea of a movie about Facebook, even if it was a Fincher-Sorkin collaboration.
Yeah, and my other reservation was I just thought this is too recent of a history to be needing its own movie. This just happened.
It almost felt like we're still kind of living in that moment in a way.
Right. So I was like, how could we possibly be ready for this story yet when the story is still unfolding? And so it just...
So you kind of purposely skipped it in the theater?
Yeah,
this is not a movie I need to rush out and see.
Right. I didn't feel particularly compelled to go see it. And honestly, I'm having a really hard time even remembering when it came out. By the time I watched it, had I been hearing how good it was, or and I can't even really remember. I just think it came out, and once it was available to rent, it's okay, this is very available and low stakes to me, so let's just go ahead and do it. But I don't think at any point I was ever that excited. It's just here's a movie that I'm going to pop on.
That's interesting,
and we'll see how it goes. And then I think my first watch, my response probably was not what you would expect for my favorite movie of all time. I didn't have the Jaws response that you had, where I was gotta rewatch this immediately. This is so captivating.
It's just it's such different. Excuse me. Obviously, it's a completely different movie than Jaws. That goes without saying. But Jaws has that adventure element to it. We talked about last week. It's horrifying. But when they're out at sea, in the last act of the movie, just the adventure and stuff like that. And this movie is so different. I mean, don't you think it's accurate to say this is just a dialogue-driven movie?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think probably what drew me in immediately after first watch, just even say this is a really good movie, and I think this is one I'm going to revisit, is I've always been really fascinated by movies that require a lot of creativity to tell a simple story. So stories that take place in like one location.
Yeah.
I'm always in because I just want to be like, how do they do it? What are they going to do that's going to make this
keep my
interesting?
attention?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or limited characters or just so movies that are bare minimal. And nothing about this movie seems bare minimal. But when I reduce it down, when I look back and I go, okay, I thought this couldn't work because it's about the creation of a website and it's boring nerd grunt work. It's the creation of a website. It's what it essentially is. Like I imagine if somebody tried to make a movie about me editing our podcast, it would be the most boring movie
Right.
in the history of movies. So the fact that they could take this concept and then create somehow this really compelling movie,
It is. Yeah.
it's like, okay, I got to go back and figure out how did they do this? How did they take an idea that I go, this shouldn't have worked. This doesn't make sense for a movie. How did they make a great movie out of it? And so honestly, like probably why I say this is my favorite movie is because this is where my movie nerddom is really going to come through. Sure. If I was going to like teach a class on a movie and we're going to like really overanalyze and break down a movie, this is the movie I would pick because I could just take so many different aspects and break it down, like why I think this movie does work and what they did that was so smart that made it work. And so I actually went back and I wrote a blog several years ago in 2016 when I was like writing a lot of movie review blogs, and I started doing some like rewatch reaction blogs, and I did this movie, and my whole blog was about how this movie shouldn't have worked, and here are the elements that I think are crazy that this movie worked, and I went through and was like, as a writer for this movie about a website, they get Aaron Sorkin, great writer, but he's known for writing like political stuff. And self-admitted, he doesn't even use Facebook. It doesn't even really understand it.
Right. It's not a world he understands.
Yeah, so it's like, great choice. For a director, we're going to get a guy who directs movies about serial killers.
Horrifying movies about serial killers.
Dark, gritty serial killer movies. Okay, that's the guy you want to direct your...
Yeah.
For the score, we're going to get the guy from Nine Inch Nails and Atticus Ross, who was a collaborator with him even with Nine Inch Nails and then some other movies. And then as a cast, we're going to get a bunch of relative unknowns. The one guy you're going to know is a pop star. And Justin Timberlake. And it's just like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a nice perspective.
How is this stew going to come together? Because it feels like you're throwing in ingredients that just don't make sense. But then it's, we've talked about it before on here, the balance of things that, you take Sorkin's sort of optimism and his ability, like the thing I love about Sorkin is it's not that he writes all the characters to be likable. Actually, most of the characters in this movie are unlikable, but he writes them always empathetically.
Yeah.
As I saw him interviewed one time, he's like, how do you write villains? He goes, the thing you absolutely cannot do as a writer is you can't view them as a villain. You got to figure out, why in their own head they're the hero of their story. And you could tell he does that. And he takes these guys that aren't likable and he writes them unlikable, but he writes them in a way that they're almost believable because unlikable people do still think of themselves as the good guy.
Sure.
And that's where these characters are. And so there is still this like optimism to it. But then you got Fincher who's going like, we're not going to put any extra like optimism in this. He's so like, we're going to be so grounded, so real, so dark. We're going to put all the like the negative, we're not going to shy away from making people unlikable and unlikable circumstances. And he directs his butt off in this movie. Like
he does.
Quick aside, I was reminded, I was actually listening to the Rewatchables episode about this, and they were pointing out that The King's Speech was the movie that sort of cleaned up at the Oscars.
I wrote that down in my notes.
And I honestly think, like, it shouldn't, I would obviously go with The Social Network as Best Picture over King's Speech, but I can't believe the director of King's Speech won Best Director because there's nothing about that movie that you'd be like, how impressive they did that. But Fincher has got all these great little flares in this movie to make it visually compelling because, again, it's in a movie that's mostly about people talking and sometimes about website building. How are you going to make it so visually captivating?
Yeah.
I mean,
he does.
It should have just been a clip of him doing the crew race. And been like, this guy just made a crew race look like the coolest thing in the world. So
the Oscars are just weird.
They are.
We could do a whole podcast about how weird the Oscars are. I always thought it would be so fun to go back just as a personal project, and I would love to like personally like redo the Oscars how I would do it. And I would have very little in common with the actual Oscars.
Maybe we'll tuck that away for a future episode.
Fun. That'd be really fun. Just pick a few random years and that'd be really fun.
But just the way that Sorkin and Fincher balance each other.
Yeah. Well, it's impossible to talk about this movie without Sorkin and Fincher, and just that weird marriage of creativity and you're right. I guess I didn't think of it, like you were thinking of it. Where you now, because of course we have the perspective, you go, oh, what a great combination. But you also think that could have gone really wrong.
Yeah,
because they really do seem like two opposites, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it obviously they trusted each other.
Yeah.
Is what you get out of this project because Fincher really stuck to the script from all the accounts I hear. Like they shot it just as it was in the script, so Fincher had the trust in him to go like, I'm going to shoot it just as you wrote it.
Yeah.
And Sorkin had the trust in him to say, I'm going to. Because actually, originally Sorkin was thinking he was going to do his directorial debut with this, but then when Fincher said he would take over, he acknowledged like, okay, this guy's great and he knows what he's doing. I'm going to trust his vision of it, and so he hands over controls to Fincher, and their trust ends up being what really creates something beautiful here.
It really worked out well, and I think the most impressive is that Fincher stuck to Sorkin's script. Anything I've ever read about Fincher, he doesn't come across as like the nicest guy in the world.
Right.
I think he's very good at what he does. I think he knows he's very good at what he does, and I've always read and heard that he's very standoffish or just very passionate. Right. It's going to be my way, and he has these visions for how his movies want to be, and so
But it probably also, just thinking about that now, it was probably necessary because when Sorkin writes these dense, dialogue-driven scenes, and they've got to be said so rapidly, and I bet there's a temptation for directors when actors are trying to get out the Sorkin dialogue and get it at the right pacing and all that stuff, where there's directors who go like, hey, pretty good and close enough, and hey, yeah, you put a little of your own flair in there, and you someone like Fincher probably has no problem going, hey, we're going to get it exactly like it was on the page.
Yeah.
We're going to do the 99 takes that it takes.
Yeah, he's known for that, like doing just literally almost like hundreds of takes sometimes on simple shots.
And we're going to get it exactly the way that we want it, exactly the way it's on the page, and we're not going to, settle for anything less.
Yeah.
So that's pretty incredible. And then, I joked about giving the score to the guy from Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
And it was his first movie score.
I know.
And actually, he writes one of the most beautiful movie scores, and it's so perfect for the tone of the movie.
It is.
And
he won an Oscar for it.
He did.
I did do that research.
And it's, I don't think you can separate like how well the movie works from how good the score is because it just so perfectly complements everything that's happening on the screen.
And I mean, what a hard job to come up with the score for a movie like The Social Network, where there's no action, obviously. I mean, what a hard job, and he really succeeded. And
we talked about Hans Zimmer's Joker score a couple of podcasts back, and just like that sort of tension, sound, which is almost something that Trent Reznor did with Nine Inch Nails. But he took something similar, but he made it the hero's theme, the hero's theme of Social Network. So like in the Joker, in the Dark Knight, Joker, of course, it was just building a tension and like a fear and a dread.
Oh yeah.
And in this one, it's just building like angst, like sort of normal nerd teenage angst.
Yes, that's a good way
perfectly.
To put it.
But then he overlays it with like this beautiful piano.
I know, it's crazy.
And so like at first you're like, oh, there's this tension, this angst, and there's this beautiful piano, and then there's the boom.
It's
like
really
just, like,
impressive.
Hits, and it's
really impressive.
Yeah, everything about it really works.
It does. And to me, like, I don't know if I'm stepping on any of your points, but to me, the two things I wrote down that are the biggest thing about this movie is, like we talked about, Fincher and Sorkin together. And then, like you already mentioned, the cast is crazy. And there's two different ways to look at it. Like you were saying, at the time, really pretty much all unknowns, except Justin Timberlake. Because I remember that definitely being a thing where I was like, wait, Justin Timberlake is going to be in a David Fincher movie? That seemed weird at the time. I think he does great in the movie. Do you?
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
I think I've over the many times I've watched it, I've gone a little up and down with like, is he good? Is he awesome? Is he great? Is he like? I'm not sure.
I get that.
And then like at some point it just hit me like he's just perfect for the part he's supposed to play, because he's playing kind of a guy you're supposed to feel like really questionable about, who plays up like his own grandeur and importance and things, and I'm like, oh, he's actually doing like
he's doing
whether
he's really good at it.
Whether it's his great choices or it's just what he brings in as being Justin Timberlake, it just works.
It does. I mean, and it's hard to understand at the time. You know, that was, like I said, I remember just being like, what? Like, Justin Timberlake? And, you know, Jesse Eisenberg, I should have done my research. I didn't. I don't remember really what his resume was like up to that point, but he wasn't a huge star.
He had done...
he'd done like Zombieland.
He'd done Zombieland and Adventureland.
Yes.
2 Land movies. But in
and
both
people
of those,
really liked those movies.
You know, he had a... sort of a lane, like he plays the like nerdy, neurotic kind of guy, and in comedies, you know, like nobody knew that he could be like such a serious, dramatic, Oscar-worthy movie like this, and he crushed it.
He does. I mean, full disclosure, I don't love him.
Yeah.
I think for some of the reasons you're saying, where it just kind of feels like he's always playing the same character. He's phenomenal in this movie.
Yeah,
he's so good in this movie. He was perfect.
Yeah. So getting into a little more of like what I love about the story and what they did is, again, I mentioned this a few podcasts back, but I really think that Facebook itself, the website itself, is sort of a MacGuffin in the movie because, and I think it goes back to Sorkin not really even understanding the draw of Facebook. He doesn't use it. So there's very, like, if you watch it for a movie that's about the Facebook, they say Facebook a lot. There's very little shown or ever that really has to do with the website itself. It's minimal.
It could not be Facebook at all, and not change the movie.
Right.
It could just be any other. It could just be a movie about the creation of a generic website.
You're right. Yeah. And I think that's really
a smart move.
why it can work so well is because it focuses on these human relationships. And as much as I like a happy ending, I like an optimist, I like my characters to be likable and win, I also do love just characters being interesting and their dynamics always being in friction, and this one does it so well because really, like, you kind of go on character by character. So the Mark Zuckerberg character in this movie, he's driven by this desire to be accepted and fit in and recognized. It starts off that great conversation to begin the movie.
That's so good.
I want to get into a final club because it leads to a better life. Because how do I impress people so that they'll pay attention to me?
Just that great dialogue right off the bat.
And he ends up in his talking himself out of the relationship he's in.
I know, because he's so good.
He's just so unaware and condescending and rude to this girl. Yeah. And then so she's like breaks up with him, and then the rest of the movie is him like, how do I do something great and draw attention and acceptance to myself? And he ends up creating the website where he's like, we're in charge of this great thing, so it's ours, so we're automatically in. Yeah. And it grows as big as it does. And then the movie's ending is him sending her a friend request
and just refreshing
and it's basically like, am I big enough now to have earned what I lost in the very beginning? Yeah. I had it and I thought I needed to do something great. Now I've done something great, and I'm left wondering, can I even get it back?
Stuff like that it's so good. Yeah, it's just such good movie making.
It's such a good like human, like everybody's had that thing where like they thought thing A was going to be the solution to all their problems, and they realized at the end it was actually thing B, and I could have had that all along. Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say, and like you said, Facebook is just, it's what they use, but it could be anything. Yeah. It doesn't have to be Facebook.
I listened to a couple different things talking about the social network, just kind of getting other people's thoughts on it. And one of the things that kept coming up was people complaining about the Christie character, which is Andrew Garfield's character, Eduardo Saverin, his girlfriend in the movie, the Asian girl. And they complained like, oh, she's really underwritten. Oh, this like, she turns crazy and there's no hint at it. And I'm like, I actually think her character is exactly what it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. I think the point is that just like everything else in the movie, Eduardo thought he got what he wanted, and it turned out not to be what he wanted because Eduardo's sort of along for the ride with Facebook. He just wants to do something with his friend, and then he's like, yeah, it'll be something fun to do. But where he really gets drawn is like, hey, like this is drawing the attention of girls to us. Like this seed sort of planted early, like that Eduardo he's a nerd who just wants some attention from girls.
Yeah.
And they get groupies.
Yes.
And he turns into a girlfriend, and then she turns crazy, and people are like, there was no clue that she was crazy, and all of a sudden her character's crazy. I'm like, how about the fact that the first night they met, she takes him into a bathroom for sexual favors?
Right.
And like, I think that was your clue that this girl's probably
a little bit of a tip off.
Yeah, I think that was the clue that like you were thinking, the Eduardo character's thinking, this is great because this girl's so into me so fast, but you don't get things like that so fast. Like it comes at a cost. The girl who's willing to do that, she's crazy. And then she's going to be obsessive, and she's going to set a fire in your trash can with the silk scarf that you bought her. Like, it's what I think sort of explains. Like, you're not. None of this is going to bring you what you think you want. Just because you had some success, and whatever attention you get from the success is going to be just as problematic as the problems you already had. Which I think is great.
Garfield's great in the movie.
He really
I
is. I don't know if it directly led to him being Spider-Man, but I know it kind of got him big enough that then, not far from then, people were like, this guy's really likable. I bet he'd be a great Spider-Man. And say what you will about the Spider-Man movies, I thought he was a really good Spider-Man,
I
too.
did too.
So he's a likable guy.
Yeah, he is. He's really good.
I still remember being shocked to find out that the Winklevoss twins were not played by real-life twins, that it was one guy, and they were using CGI in a lot of scenes.
I remember that being a talking point also.
Armie Hammer, boy, has he had a roller coaster of a career, and I should just say his public view of him.
He's canceled right now.
He's canceled now, But it was like it was kind of like, oh, who's this guy? He's an up-and-comer, big time.
Yeah.
Then he did the Lone Ranger, and that movie bombed so hard. Everybody's like, his career's over. He's not going to survive this. And it was down for years. And then he had this, this revival, and he was a big deal again. And then you're right. Like, now he's canceled. There was some documentary that came out about how he, I don't know, was a terrible person.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never watched
those
documentaries.
I just kind of stay away from all that stuff.
So I don't know if he's just done for good, but he was, setting all that aside, really good in this movie.
He is really good.
Again, when you watch it over and over again, you realize like they do a great job of creating distinct characters amongst the twins.
They
like
really
one of them's
do.
much more aggressive, one of them's much more like respectful and like gentlemanly, and just their dynamics are very great.
And I really think if something in that movie could have gone wrong or just been too distracting, it could have been that. I think just the twins, even if it's all based off real stuff, I think that was handled so well in the movie, and I think that's something that could have gone really wrong. I think,
and that's another example to me of they could have been very one-note, cartoonish, villainy characters, and I think Sorkin did a great job again of making them very human. Every time I watch it, there's times with every character where I'm going like, I really get this character's perspective and point of view.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I like about it. I get why the other characters don't get their point of view and don't like them. I get what's wrong with the characters, but there's always something that I get about the character's point of view and something likable about the characters in the way that they're done. And of course, one of the most iconic lines in the movie comes from them when their friend says he wants to hire the Sopranos to beat the crap out of him. He says, we don't even have to. I'm 6'5", 220, and there's two of me. So
that's really good.
That's a great line of dialogue.
I really like when a movie or a director or a screenwriter is willing to do a movie knowing that you have unlikable characters in the movie.
Yeah.
It's so easy to play it safe, and like I've said on here before, that's one of my biggest, probably my least favorite kind of movie is just a boring, forgettable movie. And I always like when any kind of movie, whether it works or doesn't work, it works here, is just willing to be like, look, I know that these characters are obnoxious, or I know, they're just not afraid of that kind of stuff. I always appreciate that.
And some of my go-to to emphasize that point is the two Steve Jobs movies that came out after he was dead, which Sorkin wrote. The one Steve Jobs stars Michael Fassbender, and it was a lot like Social Network. They were like, it's not a real biopic. These events didn't happen like this. We're just trying to capture the essence of the man. And they made him, in a lot of ways, very unlikable in that movie. He was very abrasive, very standoffish, but it made very compelling scene work. And then around the same time, Ashton Kutcher had his Jobs movie come out, and it was much more the standard biopic fare, and they did a lot more they basically made him more of like a idealized version, and it just was boring because of that.
I can't say I've ever seen.
I've not watched it start to finish. I watched a stretch of it one time to see okay, let me see, and I was like, man, I could just fall asleep because you could tell they're just trying to tell the story, and it's just not. It's not that compelling. And part of it is they told it linear, and that's another thing we got to talk about this movie. It's something we talked about with Oppenheimer. We use this movie as an example when talking about Oppenheimer.
Yep.
I think if they would have told this movie in a linear structure,
you don't think it'd be your favorite
movie?
movie?
Oh my gosh, I don't think it'd even be a good movie.
Yep.
But the way they use cutting back and forth between the deposition scenes, and then telling what happened to give context and keep the story moving, I don't know how it would have worked if they didn't, and I don't know how Sorkin finds out about this story. It was a book being written at the same time, and he basically before the book was even out, he got commissioned to write the screenplay for it, and the guy and him were comparing notes. I don't know how Sorkin looked at it and said, "Well, this will make sense if I structure it like this part here, this part here." I don't know how he organizes that, and it makes sense in his head to lay out the screenplay,
and then it translates to on the screen.
It's like the way it had to be done.
It is. It's a great tool to have for the right kind of filmmaker. I mean, you have to be just next level intelligent, and just like you said, to be able to understand in your own mind how this is going to work and how this is going to tell the story better. And it makes so much sense that you brought this up when we were talking about Oppenheimer, because those are two just great examples of this is done so well, and it was the right move. And it really does, like I said, it makes you wonder, would this have worked just as a straight story? And those are two good examples. I just don't think it would have.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many similarities in those movies.
There are a lot of similarities.
Great directing, great writing, great acting, non-linear story, and a story that feels like action, even though it's mostly just dialogue.
And both movies, very little happens.
Yeah,
I mean it's crazy.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes. One of the things I love about this movie is from start to finish, it keeps me compelled. The first scene, that scene with him and Rooney Mara in the bar having that argument that goes back and forth. That that's one of the best scenes in the movie. It happens right away, and then it goes right from that to him creating this website where it compares two girls, and it's of course it's supposed to be something terrible that he did, because it is terrible that you sit there and compare girls based on how they look.
Right.
But they contrast that with the party going on at the club, that the party that he thinks he needs to be in, and it's going, here's the way that this lifestyle is going, and here's what drives nerds to sit there and just create something on their computer that eventually is going to make them too big for even that club.
Yeah.
But this club is just really over dramatized, way
over the top.
Supermodel girls show up and they just are throwing themselves at these frat boy guys basically. But over here he's doing this, and then by the end of the scene, as it's jumping back and forth, it shows guys at that party looking at his website and being more enthralled with it than their crazy party going on.
That's and
it's just how these two worlds, are so contrasted, but
and I do think it's just stuff like that's the kind of stuff you have to have in a movie where it is so much just dialogue and stuff. You almost have to find clever ways like that, because that's almost like it's funny, like you're saying, that they're so into what he's doing, not into these women and stuff. That's humor without. It's not obviously slapstick humor.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that does make the movie compelling. And so you're not just sitting there going, okay, it's still just a bunch of guys talking about a website.
Yeah.
And that's where, I guess, just probably the genius of Sorkin.
And it's really the only scene where you get a lot of tech talk that you don't even understand, as he's talking about how he's going to hack all these different houses on campus to get the pictures, and he's talking about running these scripts and these codes to download all these things, and it doesn't even matter that this would be boring if you did understand it, and you don't understand most of it because of the way it's just jumping so fast, rapidly. The music's just perfect, and it's like got like a club beat to it, so it just feels like everything's happening really dynamic.
Yes.
And it's like a great hacking scene like that you would have in like a heist movie or something. Right. But he's just stealing pictures to make a website.
And I actually wrote that down in here. I think that's one of the biggest things that the movie does a lot of things right. That's one of the biggest things I think is it finds that perfect balance of tech talk, and it's a movie that it is smart and it sounds smart and the characters are smart, but it doesn't leave just your average Joe in the dust where you're just there going, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
It's a really good balance of like they're saying things and they have, like you said, the tech talk, but you're like, but I do understand what they're doing as much as I need to understand it.
Right.
I never felt like I was left behind, or there's just always that danger of a movie where all the characters are so much smarter than I am. And again, going back to like our comparison with Oppenheimer, that's something I thought Oppenheimer succeeded in really well too. And we talked about that, the science talk and stuff like that, where you're like, okay, like what they're saying makes enough sense to me that I understand. I can somewhat keep up with the plot of this movie. I'm not being left behind.
Right.
That's a good that's an important balance in a movie like this, I think.
Yeah. Of course, this movie has one of the things that I talk about in my comfort movies. The thing I love is just smartest guy in the room stuff. Yeah. I also love, with smartest guys in the room, guys who are just unapologetically kind of jerks, for lack of a better word. Like Mark Zuckerberg, like he has no problem kind of speaking his mind and telling people off. Of course, maybe the most famous bit of dialogue is in the deposition scene where the guy asks, "Do I have your full attention?" Yeah, and he says, I had to swear an oath and I don't want to perjure myself, so no. Yeah. You have my minimal amount of attention. Yep. And all that. Yeah. That's just the best. And actually, like, rewatching it, one of the things I noticed with Mark is there was only 2 times that he sort of apologizes in the whole movie. One is in the beginning scene when his girlfriend breaks up with him, and he doesn't do it until he realizes, he goes, "Wait, is this real?" Yeah. She says, he goes, "Okay, then I apologize." And it's very clearly like, okay, I don't want the consequences about to happen.
I'm just saying what you want me to say.
The only other time, and it's such a small moment, is they're doing he's doing the intern challenge where guys are having to do this hacking thing and drink, and everybody's there cheering it on, which is such a great movie scene that would never happen in real life. Like all these people around cheering on guys doing a hacking challenge, but it's a great movie scene.
Makes for a great movie, yeah.
But the Andrew Garfield character comes in and he's, Mark's telling him about it. Mark Zuckerberg's telling him about doing all the shots, and he's like, "What part of the job would people have to do drunk?" And he goes, "You're right. A better test would be, can they keep a chicken alive?" Which is a whole plot point about. Yeah. And as soon as he says it, he goes, That was mean. Like, I feel bad about that one. And that's the only time you ever see him. And I was like, and it's a great moment because it shows like there is something more between like we've been told these guys are best friends, but there's a lot of moments where we're like, Mark really is crappy to this guy. But just seeing that moment of him be like, I said something crappy and I'll actually acknowledge it to you, is one of the few times where you're like, okay, I get that they actually are best friends.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because it's such a small thing, but you realize like he's never done it at any other point in the movie. Mm-hmm. That's his whole thing, is he does and he doesn't have any regret. He'll use anybody. He's just all about, what do I need to accomplish?
Yeah. Well, and all this is just speaking to your point of you love a movie so much you rewatch it and then you just find things like that you maybe didn't notice before. That's always so much fun. Who do you think gives the best performance in the movie?
Oh man, I probably go back and forth on this a whole lot because there's times when you ask me and I would say, I'm going to go with Armie Hammer. I just think the fact that he pulled off playing those twins and like so likable, so good. One of my favorite scenes is them meeting with the dean or the president of the school. Yeah. And it's just a great little like banterful scene, and they're just so good in it. Yeah. They're so good. I say they're so good. It's one guy. It's one guy. He's so good at it.
He is so good.
But if I just honestly, probably Eisenberg.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
He's just so good. I think also there was a moment. I think this was probably the first movie I actually saw him in. I think even Adventureland and Zombieland I saw after this movie, and I probably thought early on like, well, this is just he's kind of this guy. It's real easy for him to play, this oddball. Mm-hmm. But I think the more distance I get from it, and having seen him in other things, and just I'm like, no, it actually was just a really great
Performance,
performance. You know, it's a little like it's obviously a totally different style, but it's a little like watching Cruise play the hot shot, lawyer in A Few Good Men, and you go like, well, this is just what Cruise does. He plays the young hot shot, but then you're like, no, he's actually like, I don't know who else could have pulled off these lines and the way he does things. Yeah. And Eisenberg's kind of the same way in this movie.
Yep. And there's always something to be said, I think, when someone can pull off like I kind of want to hang out with this person. I kind of want to punch this person in the face. And I say like that's how you feel, and like that's impressive when you can pull that stuff off. I agree. I think it's Eisenberg too.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. A lot of people love Rooney Mara in this movie. Mm-hmm. I have absolutely no problem with her. I think she's fine. I think she's great. She's just in it so little, and like her job is just to be like a very likable, normal girl. Yeah. But what's fascinating to me is that just a couple years later, she works with Fincher as the girl with the dragon tattoo. And I'm like, she is unrecognizable between the two characters. Like, hey, this really like normal, wholesome girl, and
the 100% opposite.
Yes. I just didn't see that coming. We'll say that. That was, but another one. Like, I don't love the girl with the dragon tattoo, but I think I'm still really impressed with it because Fincher does such a good job with it.
It's a rough watch.
It is a rough watch. I've only watched it once, and it's one of those ones like I should revisit sometime, but like I'm not ready to be all depressed and down.
No, you really need to brace yourself, or I don't know what the right phrase is, but yeah, that's not one you just pop in.
Yeah,
but
it might be like of all of Fincher's, like so many of his are dark. It might be the one that's the least hopeful at all. I don't know, like has the least levity, I guess maybe is the word that I should look for, because all those other ones, there's at least like elements of levity or like some lightheartedness amongst, between all the darkness. And that one just feels like there's just straight.
Nothing. Like even Seven, which is like the darkest movie ever made, basically. Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt with Paltrow, that scene where the train and Morgan Freeman starts laughing, and that's but like Dragon Tattoo. So I want to ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Do you think of this as more of a Fincher movie or a Sorkin movie?
Oh man, what a great question. Probably, I think of it a little more of a Sorkin movie.
Me too.
But that might just be my personal bias towards the writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think
I do too.
I think ultimately it's distinct. It's more distinct from Fincher's other works than it is more distinct from Sorkin's other works.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Fincher, you just associate him so much, I think, because of Seven, Zodiac, Girl with Dragon Tattoo, and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's such it's weirder to me that it's a Fincher movie than it is that Sorkin wrote it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I was curious what you thought.
Yeah. I would like to see those two pair up again, but honestly, I would just like to see Fincher do some more stuff like this that seems outside of his normal.
This is something we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Directors definitely, it seems to me like even the great ones who like Scorsese is my favorite. They find what they're comfortable in, not just genre wise, but they like Scorsese, even though I think he's the greatest, he does repeat a lot of the same tricks. Mm-hmm. The slow-mo or the freeze frame and the voiceovers. Give Me Shelter pops up in like 6 of his movies, And we've talked about this several times where you do just wish that sometimes the director would just do something like, I'm going to leave all my old tricks behind and just do something completely new and different.
Yeah.
Now, if Give Me Shelter pops up in Killers of the Flower Moon, there's a problem. I wonder if Give Me Shelter and Air Bud Golden Receiver, I wonder? I don't know. I'll have to go back and rewatch.
I don't know, but what if Scorsese had directed that?
It would have been much more violent. There would have been a lot of freeze frames on Air Bud and then him giving voiceover. Or like the last half hour would be like the last half hour of Goodfellas, where Air Bud's just drugged out of his mind and running frantic.
Yeah, he's had success and it goes to his head, so he starts doing cocaine.
Oh my goodness!
That's all I want now is for Scorsese.
Scorsese's Air Bud. Oh my gosh!
Oh wow! What a great idea! Yeah, Fincher went a little bit outside of his norm with the movie he did for Netflix, Mank. But
have you watched that?
I have. I'm just always weary of when I hear the term passion project from filmmakers. I don't know why. It just always seems like when it's a passion project, they're too close to it or something. Like they just can't see the problems.
Yep.
And
that was a chore to sit through. And I love Fincher's movies.
Yeah.
I was bored. Honestly,
it was a lot like the movie that it was the subject matter of, Citizen Kane. It was like when we talked about Citizen Kane. Like I could watch it and go like, I can appreciate there's good filmmaking here and why people would respect it. It's clearly well made, but I'm
not engaged at all.
Yeah. Good performances and everything. Like everything about it I could respect, but I just couldn't like.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more.
There's other examples of filmmakers doing passion projects that were the same. It's a little different, but Scorsese's Silence. I know was a passion project for him.
Garfield.
And you know what? It's talking about a rough watch movie.
Holy gosh, yes.
It's probably actually why it wasn't a success was how difficult of a watch it is. Not anything to do with that it wasn't well made or anything, but it's just sometimes there's a reason why it was a passion project for so long and wasn't getting made.
Yeah.
And those are, those types of movies. So I don't really remember how we got on this rabbit
trail.
I don't either.
We're completely off the trail now. So let me bring it back. I'm going to ask you. I told you this morning I was going to grill you. Do you remember? You talked about. I didn't see this in the theater. Do you remember it kind of clicking in your head of like, oh, I think this is like, was there a moment when you just rewatched it one time and all of a sudden it was like, this is my favorite movie? Or did it just kind of happen over, or did you just find yourself wanting to continue?
I think it was more of a gradual thing. Mm-hmm. I think it was, I really like this movie. Second watch was more like, oh, I love this movie. Third watch was like,
this movie's brilliant.
Like, really special. And then like at a certain point, it's just
one day it's just your favorite movie.
Like I'm finding myself like once a year I've got to watch this movie.
Yep.
And so at a certain point it's like, I think this, as I'm sort of ranking movies and like you start nitpicking like how can I move this one above another one, and it's got literally everything I like. Except for sports. Sports might be the only thing I like that's not in this movie, where it's smartest guy in the room. It's kind of a buddy movie, but it's lots of tension. It's how do I take something that doesn't seem compelling on the surface and make it really compelling? It's great writing, great directing, great act, great score. It's just literally like every element that I want in a movie, it's in there.
Yeah. Knowing you like I know you now and thinking, Fincher, Sorkin, smart dialogue, it's an intelligent movie. I was thinking this week, I was like, man, it was like they all got together and were like, let's make Jeremy Mathias' favorite movie. And then they just went out and did that.
It really is. In hindsight, it is like they said,
like,
you, Jeremy Mathias, are the target demographic, and it's going to be a bullseye for you.
I also just love on this podcast, a lot of times we talk about, you love Fincher's intelligent, and then I'm just like, Rocky 3 is so good. Like, we clearly you're more of a thinker than I am, because you like these smart, intelligent movies, and I'm just like, man, when Rocky climbs up the mountain in Rocky 4, that's great.
But you know what? I still love those movies.
You do. I'm just kidding. You're not a movie snob at all.
I can't be, but one of my favorite films of the last 10 years is Mad Max Fury Road, and that is going to be the total opposite of everything I've said about story and dialogue in this movie.
There's literally none.
We'll maybe talk more about that one sometime.
That'd be a good one to do.
But yeah, this one it checked all my boxes.
Yeah. Do you think? If you had to guess, do you think it will always be your favorite movie? I know there's always a chance of something coming along, but
I think there's a good chance.
Yeah, I'm very confident in thinking that Jaws will always be my favorite movie.
Yeah,
I'm open to something taking its spot. I try not to be closed-minded about it, but I just have the feeling. But my movie's of course much older than yours, so like you said last week, if it's been my favorite movie for this long, I think it always will be.
Right. Yeah, and I think this one it's been long enough. It's just 13 years, but it's been long enough now, and it kind of has that like sentimental value on top of how I mentally feel about it now, that I think it's pretty settled in.
Yeah,
I will say it is a much harder movie to find any sort of like a apparel for? Like I was searching, like I got a Jaws t-shirt. I was like,
I don't have a social network.
I just searched, was like, is there even such thing as the Social Network t-shirt? And
That's funny.
Really not, except for, those sites where like people basically create their own. I was like, even like is there an Aaron Sorkin shirt? And like about the best you get is a very generic shirt that just says written by Aaron Sorkin. And I'm like, and I love that, but it's going to cost me like $30 to get a written by Aaron Sorkin shirt. Yeah. And so,
one thing a Social Network does have, like we talked last week, how the Jaws poster jumped out, and obviously this is so much different. It does have a great poster and a great tagline to it.
Yeah,
where it's like you can't get to what is it?
It's like 500 million friends without
making some enemies.
Yeah,
that's a great tagline, and the poster is literally just Jesse Eisenberg, just kind of not even menacing. I wouldn't say he's kind of just expressionless. Maybe I don't know. Yeah. It's just his face, and it's kind of made up like a Facebook thing, and it's got that great tagline.
Yeah. No, it really is good. Yeah.
One thing I noticed too when I kind of researched this movie a little bit, it's on a lot of like best movie of the decade lists. I mean, it was a it was acclaimed. I mean, a lot of people hold it in really high regard.
Yeah, which it's, I wouldn't say shocking to me, because obviously if I really like it, I agree. But I still like it the same way I think like it should work. I still look at it and go like, I can't believe everybody likes this. Mm-hmm. Like normally my tastes are so specific. The things that make people call me a movie snob. Yeah. Or what I love about
this movie. This movie has pretty universal appeal. It seems like to me.
Yeah, because again, I think that at the core being about people trying to find meaning and acceptance and struggling through that is so universal.
Yeah. And then the idea of like climbing your way to the top is always usually makes for a good movie.
Yeah. And I think almost every guy can relate to that feeling of like, no matter how successful you are, at the end of the day when he sends the friend request to the girl he likes and just like, have I done it? Will she approve me now? Will she accept me now?
I think the ending, just personally, I think that's the best scene of the movie. Just him. It's just such a great ending. I love how they end that movie, and just him, just like you said, just now. Have I achieved enough yet? It's a great ending.
Yeah, and that's another one. I sit there, and the first couple times I watched it, I was like, it's a great movie, but I was never really sure about the ending, just because I was like, it's interesting that this is just. Again, sort of a recent history was probably the problem is we didn't know how everything was going to unfold with Facebook. And so they just had to pick a point and say, this is where we're going to end our part of the story.
Yeah.
I think now that I would look at it, I go like, it is the perfect ending. And
it is.
And it's fascinating to me, like that they said, this is the point at which Mark felt confident enough to send that friend request.
Yeah.
Like all along of course, there was a scene sort of midway through the movie after they've launched Facebook and it's starting to take off where he sees her in a restaurant and he's like, I don't know if you heard about this thing I'm doing. And she's very dismissive of him.
Yes.
And she tells him off. And his response is he walks over to Eduardo and goes, we have to expand. Like, it's just not big enough yet. Mm-hmm. She'll be impressed eventually. She's not yet. And it's like, now that he's this billionaire, basically, he's like, okay, now I think I can. But you can even see it in his body language. He's like, I'm not sure.
It's so good.
I'm just not confident still.
I think I'm giving credit to the right person. That shows you how smart Sorkin is. Mm-hmm. That he just used that, just boy and girl, boy likes girl, girl dump boy, to kind of drive the whole story. Yeah. That was so smart and so relatable. It's also impressive that they ended that movie like they did, and the ending worked so well. And again, talking about Oppenheimer was the same way. When the movie doesn't have an obvious ending, like Jaws, the ending is going to be they're going to defeat the shark.
Right.
Like that is movies like Social Network, Oppenheimer, some of these movies, they don't have an obvious ending.
Right.
And so you have to be really smart with how you choose to end the movie and where you choose to end it. And has everyone reached the emotional apex of their character? And now it's time to end the movie. It was really smart.
Yeah. And honestly, like it ends on a downer note because it ends with
he's alone he's
alone, and one of the last scenes is Eduardo being basically cheated out of the company, and those moments of like how much were this guy's shares diluted, how much was this guy's, how much, and they're all they weren't. How much were yours diluted? And he's like down to 0.03%.
Yeah.
And that music hits, and it's just like, oh man, like,
Yeah,
and
it does
like
not
that's sort of
end
like
on a
that's
high
sort of
note.
the note it ends on is like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, his best friend, he cheated out of the company, and like that's what leads us here to this point where they're in a lawsuit against each other.
It definitely does not end on a happy note.
Yeah.
So, do you have more you want to say about the movie? Because I had a couple things I wanted.
If
to
you've got
ask
a couple of things, go ahead.
Okay. So, we did this with Nolan. I think we definitely should talk about Fincher and and Sorkin. I would be curious to know, kind of a off the cuff Fincher Sorkin ranking of movies.
So obviously this one's gonna be at the top of both my list
Right.
for either of those guys. But Fincher, my second one is probably Fight Club.
Yeah.
It's one that I don't revisit as much now, but like when it came out, I mean, it hit me at the right time. I was the right age, and it was like so important to me at the time.
Yeah.
But
that movie had a ton of hype.
yeah, it's still like one that I revisit and I still enjoy.
Yeah.
So that one's probably number 2 on my Fincher ranking. Number 3, man, it's so tough because he got so many good ones.
He's got a lot of good
probably 7.
Yeah.
I'll put number 3.
7 is so good.
It's so good.
It is so good. The first time I saw 7, that's a regret I have. I didn't see it in the theater. I rented it, and that movie got over, and I think I just kind of just sat there. Like, that was a what did I just see? What just happened kind of movie. There's a lot to soak in.
Yeah. I think next I would go with Gone Girl, and honestly, I think Gone Girl might be his best like directing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good movie. It's a compelling movie, but I think when I watch that movie, that's like the number one thing I think about when I'm watching that movie is, man, he just is awesome at directing. All these scenes just look amazing and compelling. And then what do I want to go with? I almost want to pick something like off the normal trail for him. Like I almost want to say The Game as number 5 or something, just because I love how weird it is.
It is weird. It's so weird.
Panic Room,
Panic Room's
is
good.
Basically, the only thing I won't really put in consideration is Benjamin Button, which
I do not like that movie at all.
And I don't think Fincher even likes that movie. He really only did it so he could get. Like it was like one of those one for you, one for me things where
makes sense.
He did Benjamin Button for the studio, and I can't remember which movie they let him do in exchange for that.
Yeah, I don't.
Was it around Zodiac? No, I don't know if it was Zodiac.
I can't remember the timeline.
But something he got to do a movie he actually wanted to do.
That makes sense.
In exchange for doing Benjamin Button.
It's a strange choice. I mean, like Brad Pitt's good in that movie, but it's
strange. Looks amazing.
It does,
but it's just a boring movie.
It's really long. It's really long. Yeah, it's definitely not.
Yeah, it's definitely when I watched it in theaters, and I've not revisited it, and not really felt a strong urge to revisit it.
I have no connection to that movie at all.
Yeah. So did I get to 5? I guess I kind of
Social Network.
I kind of went around the 5th one.
Okay.
Because somewhere between The Game and Panic Room, 2 of his smaller movies, I would put one of those at 5.
Interesting.
What about you?
To me, 7 is number 1. It's just such a good movie. It's so shocking. I love 7. Number 2, I would go Zodiac. I think Fincher just thrives in that serial killer mystery. Really dark. I just think he thrives. I have a lot of Zodiac thoughts. It's an amazing movie. It also catches Downey and Ruffalo right before they
really blew up,
become full-time MCU guys. 7, Zodiac. I'd put Social Network probably at 3, and that's no disrespect to Social Network. I just personally, I'm more drawn to the. Maybe I'm just weird. I love something about Fincher in that world of murder and serial killers is super fascinating.
That's his lane for sure.
It is his lane. Number 4. I'm like you. I would probably go Fight Club as 4, and I would probably pick Panic Room as 5. I would say, the Panic Room is a really good movie. It's Fincher. I kind of like it when these intelligent, smart directors. I don't want to say dumb it down, but just like Fincher is clearly an intelligent guy, like Nolan and some of these directors. We go, these guys are just way smarter than I am, and I do like it when they just are like, you know what, I'm just gonna do basically just a people break into a house movie, and it doesn't really, there's no deeper meaning to it. There's no political subtext to it. It's just this is what I'm gonna do.
It's another example of, like I was talking about, movies of really contained story.
Oh my gosh!
All in one location, and how are we going to make it interesting? And
he does it. And it's a really fun movie. So that would probably be my kind of unofficial top 5. I do like his movies a lot.
Yeah. He actually, for someone who's been making movies as long as he has, doesn't have as many.
He's pretty selective.
Yeah, he's pretty selective.
Which I think is probably why, to me, Benjamin Button is so weird.
Yeah,
because he seems very selective, and like, I am only making because his first movie is Alien 3.
Yeah.
Which was a disaster. He hates it. Mm-hmm. If you want to be entertained, find some interviews with him about Alien 3. Not safe for work language usually is brought up. He really despises that movie, and he had a lot of studio interference. So that inspired him, I think, to just like, I'm in charge. I'm doing the movies I want to do. And that's why Benjamin Button to me is weird. It's kind of the oddball in all of that.
Yeah. He also, this is just a random Fincher thing, but he directed a music video for the band The Perfect Circle, Judith, and the song is Judith. But if you watch the video, you're like, yeah, actually, now that I know that this is Fincher, like,
it makes sense.
It's definitely Fincher. Like, it's very Fincher-y in the way that it's made. And so it's just kind of cool, like, when a guy like that, like, he was already... this was after he had made Seven and Fight Club, I think, when he made this music video. So he's this huge video star, and he makes this music video It is really funny. I've
listened to the commentary on the Seven Blu-ray before. It's him and Brad Pitt. You listen to that commentary, you can tell he's very in control. He's got a clear idea for how he wants. But he is also funny. Like, him and Brad Pitt basically just kind of joking around that whole... commentary. He's a funny guy, but he's interesting. I mean, like I said, very demanding, I think, very much, this is my movie, I know what I want, and you're going to step up to my vision. I'm not compromising my vision for what this movie is going to be.
Right. Yeah, and there's a great story, like, just speaking of that, there's a great story of the budget for The Social Network, where he went through the movie with Sorkin, and they figured out exactly how long it was going to be. They timed all the scenes, reading through them together, and then he figured out how much it's going to cost. And he went to the people, like the studio, and said, "This movie's going to cost, I think, $41 million." And they were like, "Okay, what if we give you 30?" He's like, "This movie is going to cost $41 million." They're like, "Okay, what about 35?" And he goes, "You think I'm negotiating? I'm telling you, this is not a $40.5 million movie. This is a $41 million movie. It's exactly what it's going to cost." And apparently, it was like right on. Like,
that's incredible,
and it was exactly at 41.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Is this your favorite? I mean, I guess this is your favorite movie. It is your favorite Sorkin.
Yeah. So Sorkin, I'll put this one at number 1. I'll put Moneyball at number 2.
Yeah.
I'll put A Few Good Men at number 3. I'll put Steve Jobs at number 4. I really love that movie.
Yeah.
I think people
it's really good.
Sleep on that a little bit. And the number 5. Man, this is where, like, I don't want to leave one out, and I'm trying to think through. I'm like, I'm probably going to forget an obvious Sorkinism, but I'm going to go with Molly's Game.
Yeah,
I brought that up before. Like, I think I'm going to go with Molly's Game for number 5.
He has a solid resume too. One thing that stuck out to me, I'd forgotten about, is he wrote Charlie Wilson's War.
Yeah,
maybe I don't appreciate that movie like I should.
That's one that I think
is that Tom Hanks and
it is
Phil
Tom
Hoffman
Hanks,
and
Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah, that's one that I think the intelligence of was hard to follow sometimes.
Okay.
Like as they talked about some political stuff, and they're talking about like overseas issues, and like there were times in that movie where they're having conversations, and I'm going, I'm so totally lost.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what's happening. So I think that one was probably his miss, in that he just got a little too into like the things that he knows, and other people didn't quite know. But still some good stuff in that movie.
Oh yeah, and I do remember Philip Seymour Hoffman's amazing in that movie. I do remember that, which he was amazing in every movie. But.
Of course, with Sorkin, I could go into his shows too, The West Wing,
I didn't even,
all that, which I didn't factor in. Just like with, honestly, even with Fincher, he did Mindhunter on Netflix, and I really enjoyed that.
And he's got a new one coming out in a couple of months on Netflix.
Yeah,
is that a movie or?
I think he's got a movie coming out. I think it's another like serial killer movie. Like he's going back to his roots, kind of.
I'm excited. I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
I mean, this is your show, so don't let me stop.
No. I mean, I think I've spoken my piece. I think I feel like I've said what I need to say about The Social Network.
Yeah.
Hopefully that this podcast is good enough that that girl will finally accept my friend request.
That's your goal. Afterwards, it's just going to be you hitting refresh on your computer. I really do. You made a good point at the beginning. I do hope for your sake sometime that this does come back into the theater.
Yeah.
Because when you love movies, I think, a lot of times you think of a movie that needs to be seen on the theater, needs to be like an action movie or big explosions and stuff like that. But there's just something about seeing your favorite movie up on the big screen. I hope for your sake you get a chance to do that.
Me too. And, we'll end with this one last thought. I almost sent this to you. Maybe you saw it, but we've talked about this and it's happening. They are putting Nolan's Batman trilogy back in theaters this fall or towards the end of this year.
I missed that.
And I'm guessing it's because a lot of these delays, they're trying to find
just need to fill.
And I saw that they're coming back to theaters, and I thought, we talked about how awesome that'd be. They're going to do it, and I think when they do it, we'll have our Nolan's Batman trilogy podcast after that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that our podcast has some influence.
Yeah,
we talked about it, and then lo and behold, it's happening.
That's right.
So
yeah,
we're starting to be we have a little pull in Hollywood.
That's right. Yeah, we got some clout.
We do. It's nice to have it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week. And,
absolutely. We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll see you again likely next week.
All right.